Hello and welcome to Your Business, Your Wealth. My name is Paul Adams. I'm CEO and founder of Sound Financial Group. And normally I have Corey here on the show to co-host with me, but we have a special guest today for a conversation. And a conversation that's going to be personal, that we're inviting all of you into. And it's a personal conversation about building financial independence and how you don't have to do it the way that so much of society says you should do it. Earn a high income, own all the nice things along the way, and then pop out the other side almost like magic, and you'll be able to retire one day, just put money in your 401k. Now, we've been preaching that is not necessarily the case with your money for years on this show. And our guest today, Chris Fabbro, a man who's not gone out there and been an internationally famous surgeon. He's not been a professional athlete. He's not been a real estate mogul. But what he has been is someone who's worked in natural resource management for the last 20 years and currently works for the U.S. Forest Service, largely inside of fire protection and management. Mr. Chris Fabbro, welcome to Your Business,
Thanks,
Your Wealth. Yeah, so good to have you. And just kind of kicking us off and to start with here, I think many people who are listening, we survey our audience periodically, and a relatively high income bunch. Okay.
Right.
And this relatively high income bunch kind of relates to retirement planning as it relates to their income. And they kind of look at the people around them and how they're doing it. But you've kind of formulated your life in a very different way over the last 20 years and even beyond that. So maybe just a quick pause and you could share with our audience about kind of what your career history has been like to start with landing here, which I think will kind of set the tone for some of our other conversation.
Sure thing. I'm happy to go into a brief history of none of my six-figure jobs because I've always worked in either a nonprofit or public service or something that did not pay very well. So I had to be careful with what I earned. And I was lucky because in my family background, we weren't big spenders. In fact, we were pretty frugal growing up. And that laid the foundation for me to be able to better budget my money and to not have to cheat myself out of some of the finer things, but, certainly not going out to dinner every night or not buying a new car every 2 years. Those things where our basic needs were always met. We really didn't want for anything. And those habits, fortunately, stuck with me and enabled me to live a good lifestyle. But then again, my tastes were not pretty extravagant. So we can go into my work history throughout this segment as well. I went from private nonprofit public health into I was a script doctor and worked in television for a while as a writer. No, it doesn't pay big money because I'm not anybody you can IMDb. I was one of those ghosts in the background. And then when I got into natural resources, I started in firefighting. And believe it or not, it's not for federal wildland firefighters, which is what I am. It's not a high-paying gig. My starting salary was $10 an hour. Now, thanks to the infrastructure bill that just passed, now that minimum is $15 an hour for our new wildland firefighters. Not enough to raise a family on, I can assure you. So it took me many years to... Go ahead.
You're saying being a writer in California was a tough enough job that you said to yourself, I would rather deal with actual flames than these people.
To tell you the truth, it was the gig economy that just got to me. Going from gig to gig, not knowing if I'm going to have another show, if it's going to be canceled, what's going to happen in the future. It all culminated about 20 years ago with the threat of a writer's strike. And I didn't want to be a scab. And so I was looking for a summer gig. And that's when I got into firefighting. And I thought, well, I'll just do this for the summer. I had an early midlife crisis. I wanted to be a forest ranger and had such a great time. I said, screw Hollywood. I'm not going back. I'd rather sleep in the dirt, which is exactly what I started doing.
Well, and something you said there that I think could get easily overlooked by our younger audience is that the gig economy has been around a long time. I just don't want to step over that. Like it is,
Right.
that now there's the gig economy where you can do it from an app. But prior to that, there were all kinds of industries where you were constantly getting turned over. And that was just part of it.
Exactly. And there was no stability and no way for me to save for retirement living hand to mouth. Now, I want to make a point that working for the federal government as a wildland firefighter, you're not going to get rich, but you're not going to starve. And for me, it was important to start saving for retirement. And I will go a bit into how that plan works, because it's not a big fat pension like you would imagine many firefighters, particularly municipal or county, sometimes even state firefighters. They're making 3 times what I am, even now, as somebody 2 decades into this.
Well, and so maybe just winding back to that mindset. So you start fighting fires for $10 an hour. And what was it that you did that you said, okay, on this $10 an hour, which I know is 20 years ago, inflation adjusted, but that was not a lot of, it was okay, but it wasn't a lot of money. What did you do with those early checks over that summer for your new quote unquote stable career?
Well, as the expression goes, pay yourself first. So the Fed has a retirement system. They refer to it as a 3-legged stool. So essentially what you're doing is you're socking away pre-tax money into the 401k equivalent known as a thrift savings plan. So you do get part of your first leg of your stool is this meager little pension that you get, maybe about $1,000 a month. Once you do hit 62, could be up to $1,500 a month, but that's it for your pension that comes from the federal government. The other 2 legs of the stool.
I was going to say before the next 2 legs, I got to touch on that. Is like, this is not the 70% pension of your last 3 years that you so often hear about from a firefighter or police officer, some of those more rich pensions. This is the $1,000 a month at age 62-ish. For somebody, it's put in a lot of years.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And so you will need to make up for that somehow. And that's where these other 2 legs of the stool come in. You've got your Social Security benefits. And then the third is your thrift savings plan, your 401k equivalent that you are responsible for putting in. And there's up to a 5% match from the Fed, which is nice. So I would always max it out. So I still do that. But you've got to be careful in your retirement if that's all you depend on. Clearly, that's not all that I came to depend on in order to look at retiring early, which is what my plan for the coming year is.
And what? How old are you now for our audience?
52.
52. And so far in your career, you haven't gotten any big 6-figure salaries. It's just been plugging along, kind of a slope. And I guess our audience could look up pay scales and all of that, but it's like, this is the deal. And Chris is a client of Sound Financial Group. I want all of you guys to know. So we have actually verified everything that we're talking about with Chris. Because of regulation, as a reminder, because he is a client, he cannot say anything positive about his work with us because of regulations around testimonials. So just, if you guys wonder why he's not gushing, that would be why.
And you wonder why, Paul, if he's not fishing, now you know why.
That's right. That was a good one. So over the years, you've just continued to set aside money. But one thing that distracts so many people, especially in their younger years, is the cultural conversations, everybody's doing it. And you told me a story about, being in one of the bunkhouses near the fire front one year and watching these newer folks, younger folks, maybe earning some decent money for the first time in their lives, and how they would deploy their resources versus the way you would.
Well, let's clarify, not really decent money. These are kids making $12, $13 an hour, maybe first time out of the house. And so seasonally, I would live in barracks at the fire station. And, some of my coworkers, I remember the 2019 fire season, I had left the Fed for a couple of years. I'd been headhunted to work at a nonprofit conservancy. So I stepped away from the federal government for this opportunity to work at a science-based research organization. Had a great time, but ultimately did come back to fire after a couple of years. Took a job at my current pay level, but it was $20 an hour. Think about this. The equivalent of a fire prevention captain in the Fed making $20 an hour where we live. Now, yes, there's locality pay bumps if you happen to live in a metropolitan area, but it's maxing out at like 25%. So, but some of these folks that I was working with were really squandering a lot of their money on going out to dinner every night and buying themselves new trucks because they didn't have to pay a lot to live in barracks. Well, guess what? Winter's going to come. You're not going to be living in barracks. You're going to have to find a place in a ski town, which is never easy. Rents are always outrageously priced when there's a housing shortage. So, I would kind of come in like like a dad. Well, are you sure you want to really be paying $450 a month for that really pimp mobile? But yeah, it was funny because within a couple of years, they'd all gotten rid of their trucks and got something sensible.
Oh, so
not because of me, but because they realized what they were squandering. And they're like, well, here's Chris traveling the world, because travel's one of my favorite hobbies. And I play the miles and points game. And, they're like, well, I want to go to, Europe or South America. And it's like, you're not going to do that with that car payment, I can assure you. So,
well, and
I think help facilitate.
Speaking of the travel, we were talking right before we went on air that you just came back from Colombia not long ago with a mutual friend of ours, John Severson.
Yes. Hi, John.
Yeah. Hey, John. Which this is a surprise. John introduced us. He has no idea you're on the show, so I can't wait till he listens to the episodes. I'm not even going to tell him. I'm not going to send it to him special. I just want to sit back and see when he calls you and I. But how do you go about, because you do travel internationally a lot. I never hear you complain. All the times we talk, I never hear you complain about money and spending, etc. So how do you run us through those life hacks of the big money savers you see you do, whether that's travel, car purchases, etc., that you see you're doing that's, I think, not amazingly different, but I think if it's like the dependence on initial circumstances philosophy, that if you leave LA and you're 1 degree off going to Japan, you're going to hit Hawaii. That old story is, it seems like you made a 1 degree difference. You just never stop making a 1 degree difference.
It's like developing a program of exercise. If you make it a habit, then you have that muscle memory and you keep building on that. And it's the same thing with financial habits, right? Mm-hmm. So for me, this started when I was making very little money, and I was so sick of being in debt, the credit card debt mostly, but I had a car payment as well. And I just thought, no, this is ridiculous. Why? I'm not going to try to keep up with the Joneses. So
how old were you when this happened? How old were you when that? So you had car payments, you had credit card debt. You haven't been, you weren't like sinless financially before you found redemption.
Right. Yeah, no, this was in my 30s. Okay. When you've got your friends who are doing fun things, and FOMO, you don't want to be left out. So what I realized was that I needed to shift my tastes. So the annual pass at Disney, which was exorbitant, then became a national parks pass instead for $80 a year. And, canceling subscriptions, using my local library. Instead of buying new cars, just buying used. I drive around in a car that I paid $3,000 for from a buddy. It's a 2006 Honda CR-V. I have a fantastic mechanic, keeps the thing running well. The car looks good, and I then can free up a considerable amount of money for other things like travel or nice gifts for people. Although, like this Christmas, I've decided to support the arts. So my friends who are crafty or artsy are getting my business, and that's what people are getting. So just a couple of other things in terms of even like clothing. I don't buy anything new, or if I do, it's off the sale rack. I don't really have a need to try to be completely fashionable. I get by. I just hope that anybody who's listening is thinking, all right, where do you have bad habits? Where are you possibly even hemorrhaging? Or where is it death by 1,000 paper cuts? Do you really need that high-end electronic equipment? Do you really need to wear all that bling or whatever it is? Do you really need to be paying cash for travel? Like Paul had asked me to describe. For me, I got into the miles and points game because I got sick of paying so much for airfare. And it's just really simple. If you take care of yourself financially, one of the rewards is you get a good credit score. With that good credit score, you are then eligible for some pretty hefty welcome bonuses with credit card signups. And I just use my credit cards for everything, and I pay off the balance every month. I usually, once a week, I go in on the credit cards that I know that I've been charging on, and I pay those off. But again, I'm not making big purchases. I'm only buying what I know I need, but I'm getting rewarded in the form of points, especially those welcome bonuses. And then I can parlay that into nice travel. And I'm not talking economy. I like sitting in the front of the plane. I like going to the lounge. And in fact, as part of my little retirement present to myself, and I did pay cash for these, but I found some incredible sale flights on British Airways, on American Airlines that enabled me to get top tier status with all three alliances, Star Alliance, One World, and SkyTeam. And so I can go to pretty much any lounge before a flight. And that to me was like, I want that luxury. And so for me, yeah, I dropped a few thousand on business and first class fares, but I was able to work it in such a way that it parlayed into this access. And for me, having the free baggage, having the priority boarding, all those little luxuries make my travel that much sweeter.
So by you just paying attention, investing a little bit of time, again, you're charging, I'm assuming, just a couple, $3,000 a month to your cards. You're not running, it's not like you run a business on the side. That's how you hear a lot of people accumulate points. I run a business on the side. I have to charge $100,000 a month of inventory, and that gets me free stuff. Like, you are living a conservative lifestyle, putting as much as you can on credit cards and paying them off weekly, not even waiting for the month. And you still are able to accumulate those kinds of points and bonuses from those credit card companies.
Correct. Yeah. And $3,000 a month would be a really busy month, considering I really don't sometimes take that much home. So again, it's just a matter of about being smart and having good habits about what you're spending on. And do you really need that? I often will put things in my wish list or my basket online for later purchase, because a week later when I come back to it, I really didn't need the latest version of that software, for example.
I have noticed that as we have attempted to live radically within our means, which, by the way, I got to tell you, hanging out with you, and saying I live radically within my means. And I think this last year we spent about 20% of our income. And so we're doing good, except it's like standing next to you is like, I feel like I'm doing good, deadlifting 300. And you're like, well, watch, I can do 600 with one hand. That's kind of the comparison. But I've noticed that same trick of being able to just say, I really want that fill in the blank. And for me, some of those are very big and expensive. They're like an overlanding vehicle, with all the cab and everything on it. And really, oh man, it's $100,000. But maybe if I set this goal, it makes sense. And then I'll just leave it hanging out there, not having made a decision on it, not setting a goal. And you're so right that just by suspending the decision for even a few weeks, and suddenly I find myself just thinking, I don't know that my life would be any better for it, and my bank account certainly is better for me not having it.
Well, I can assure you that you don't need 100,000 to get overland. You can get yourself a Jeep for a few thousand, like a neighbor of mine has done. And she drives that thing everywhere, and she makes sure that her mechanic stays on top of any issues. And no, it's not the most comfortable thing, but it does exactly what she does, because on weekends, she loves getting out into the dirt and up, boulders and rocks. And that's something else, because I paid a few thousand for a pretty beefy truck with a nice camper, and I never use it. And I'm sitting here thinking, oh, I wasted $3,000 on something that I thought I really wanted. So if you were to drop six figures on that overland vehicle, you'd better be prepared to live in it.
Well, as you know, at least for our regular RV, we at least do that a couple months a year. So
yes, you do.
We take up residence and try to make up for the use. But even I think that's even a decent example is the degree of commitment you're making with any purchase. There's the commitment to utilize it fully. And then there's also the commitment that sits in the background, that's maintenance. And boy, Chris, I have endeavored the last 2 years to just avoid maintenance if I can.
Right.
Like buying a new piece of, we got this new 5-acre piece of property where we can live. We have our parents living with us, my wife and I's, both sides of our family, one parent, our 3 kids, us. And there's like some gear I have to buy, like a riding lawnmower or, just leaf blower, weed whacker stuff. And what I noticed, just something simple. I could go online and order the new Husqvarna mower I wanted. And I was like, I'm just going to hold, the grass isn't going to get that long the first month or two here. It's winter up here in the Pacific Northwest, so it doesn't grow fast. And I'm just going to give a look-see online for a couple weeks. And I did. And I found the exact same mower. But instead of being like $3,700 with tax, with all the options I wanted, I picked it up for $900. And didn't have to assemble. It didn't come in a crate. I didn't have to put anything together. And there were a couple minor repairs and an oil change I had to do to it, and it was off and running, and I spent less than a third. Not to mention, I don't feel near as guilty if that thing gets scratched up. I don't feel like I got to fix it. On the hood, it just says, like it's missing letters. So I got a Husqvarna mower. but that Husqvarna is nowhere near as expensive as the German-made Husqvarna.
Right, exactly. Somebody with the last name from the middle of the word is wearing a pendant with those letters.
Yeah, like the Mercedes symbols that kids used to take off the cars.
I wanted to emphasize what you were talking about in terms of delaying, because so often we do feel that pressure, particularly when we're on that wheel, that running the rat race. And I think a lot of times I've had friends do this where they will just buy toys because they don't carve out for themselves anything that might be more meaningful as a substitute. What is it that you could do instead of dropping money on that new car every couple of years, or on all those, all that bling, or, whatever the new electronics like we were talking about? What is it that really, if you had to pare back, where would you? And why don't you? I think is the bigger question.
Out of curiosity, could you give an example of where you kind of kicked up that conversation with somebody and really saw them make a pivot specifically around this? I know you want to buy this, whatever ticket item you're going to buy, but discover something to be more meaningful, you would enjoy more, and maybe a lot less.
I'm not sure if I'm any good at an intervention. I think leading by example, maybe people, it eventually kind of settles in. I mean, I think for myself, with my indulgences, I'm just going to recap with, the airline status was a big thing for me. Did I need it? No. But having it, that was something that I worked toward, that I knew, okay, even though this is, these airfares cost more than the car that I actually drive, and this status is only going to be good for a couple of years, and I'm going to have to keep it up. To me, it was worth it. And, again, I'm lucky in that what I've done through these last 20 years is I've maximized my investments. So having multiple properties that I then opened up as rentals, even though it's a pain to maintain that with tenants and they're always breaking stuff and claiming that it just spontaneously broke. These things, for a while I really hustled so I could sock away a bit of a nest egg to get far enough away. I always wanted to have, 20,000 just sitting in the bank, independent of all my retirement funds and things that I have with Sound Financial Group. I just wanted to have that pool of money sitting away from anything that I knew, like, okay, 6 months, if I had to, I could just get by without having to tell anybody, oh, Paul, I need you to tap into this account.
Yeah.
But, obviously those funds have grown quite a bit, but, it's because I think just making frugal and they're small lifestyle choices. I'm thinking of some other things that, like grabbing the check when going out to a restaurant. Wait a minute. Why even go out to a restaurant? For the amount of money that I'm going to spend on food and liquor with all my friends, why not just, my portion of the check is enough to host everybody that would be at that restaurant table. Come to my home table and I'm going to cook you some amazing Italian food, recipes from the old country taught by my grandparents and my cousins. And so I think that, in particular, one person that I did know, to answer your question in a very roundabout way, was that he just couldn't stop buying toys like drones and guns and electronics. And I'm thinking, okay, dude, I don't know what you have more than you could ever play with in a day or in a weekend. And you rarely have a weekend because you've got to work 6 days a week, about 10, 12 hours a day. Can you cut back on the work and spend more time with your family? And, eventually he did, but it was because he had health problems that made him cut back. Yeah, it had nothing to do with me and an intervention and everything to do with the fact that he was like, why does my heart pound so funny? Uh-oh, am I in trouble? So, I hope for the rest of your clients, it won't take some kind of major life issue like that if there are issues around hemorrhaging funds.
Well, and I'll say, though, even with your friend, and maybe for our audience, there may be a lot of people that don't change anything as a result of hearing this. There may be a lot of people that that didn't change anything as a result of hearing how you've lived your lifestyle. But when that happened to him and he had the heart issue, health issue, he knew there was another path he could take because you'd given him the example. And I think that's going to go to the next level here as you step off into, as we teach, the definite financial independence and a work optional lifestyle. So you can do contract work, you can do whatever. But would you share with folks what you have cooking for this coming year with travel, living multiple places, all that?
Yes. So currently, again, think about this, and I want to bring up what you had mentioned about the government pay scales. Mm-hmm. So I work off the general schedule. It's called the GS scale, and you can look this up from the Office of Personnel Management. If you just do a web search for OPM GS pay scale, it will show you the different levels of pay, and even those just below senior executive. They're barely cracking six figures. So working for the Fed, depending where you're at, if you're in Washington, D.C., that might be one thing. But if you're in a field station like all of my coworkers and me, then no, I'm making a GS7. And if you look at that scale, a GS7 starts out at, like the 20 something an hour. So, for me, I'm actually looking, I don't have enough time in as a firefighter to collect a full retirement. Instead, what I'm doing because of, and I guess this is where I'm not making a plug for Sound Financial Group, but because my portfolio has done pretty well, thanks to, I don't know, the Santa's elves at Sound Financial, I'm able to resign from my job. I will delay my retirement until I am 62. So in terms of what I have planned for 2022, my sister and I are really lucky because we have the ability to get dual citizenship with the country of Italy. Our grandfather emigrated and we qualify for that. So she's actually going to be moving there for 6 months a year as we work on our dual citizenship. I will be going every couple of months because I have ties here to Southern California. And frankly, even though I'll resign from my Forest Service position, I'll still come back as a contractor. The crazy part is, as a contractor, I'll be making 35% more. Now, I won't be getting the health insurance, so I'll be on the hook for that. And I won't be putting in time as a federal employee that I can count to my delayed retirement at age 62. But I have to look at that balance of, okay, while I'm still relatively young and able-bodied, why don't I go see more of the world, especially with all these airline points that I've racked up? And there are other things that I can do as a contractor. Now, while I've never had a six-figure job, I actually have been doing some consulting with the miles and points with other companies. And, it's nice to be making $100 an hour, helping them get set up on their credit card strategy and their travel and points and award strategies as well. So for me, when I do have some free time, I'm actually going back to writing as well. That's something I've really missed, but I knew that I was going to have to put that on hold while I focused on my career. So I had a really rewarding career, really enjoyed it. I can still go back and make money if I need to. If for some reason markets go belly up and my volatility buffer that I've worked out with Sound Financial Groups, isn't going to last for, forever. If for some reason we're in a protracted equivalent of a Great Depression. But to get back into my creative pursuits is really important to me. I wrote music. I have written novels and screenplays, and that's something that to me, I just don't want to keep putting off. And having the gift of what the recent stock returns have given me, I realize, what am I waiting for? I have this kind of middle-class puritanical work ethic, like, well, I should keep working, and just keep saving money. Really? Is that necessary? And so I'm at that crossroads where, fortunately, as a federal employee, I'm vested. If we do have a terrible economic crisis that lasts 10 years, I can go back to the Fed and go back to working. But in the meantime, I'm going back to writing.
Yeah, going back to writing. And the way that I've kind of looked at it is like, here you are. You've done a good job being diligent. You kind of mentioned that, what the recent stock market returns have given you, but I would add what your last 30 years of habits have given you and the ability to do some of those simple little things, because for many people out there, they may be listening going, the stock market returns didn't do that for me. And it may be because of what the lifestyle spending has been like. And I think one thing you've done a great job of over the years is the realization that when you buy something that requires debt, what they're lending against is your future income. And you've always kind of looked at, I need my future income for my future beyond when I earn income. And now you're going to be living bicontinental I don't even know if that's the right term. I know it's bicoastal when you're in the U.S. on two coasts, but bicontinental out of Italy. Picturing you in this apartment that you guys are looking at, and just for fun, only because everybody thinks everything's so expensive. What's the place over there going to cost you approximately a month?
So yes, we are not doing the buy this house for $1 or €1 that's falling apart. No, thank you. I have spent too much time in the real estate management game, pulling my hair out, fixing things up. We are just going to get a nice apartment that has all the bells and whistles. Rents there are so affordable. We're looking at $450 a month for a nice 2-bedroom attic apartment in the Alps. No, it's not near a major city. We're not living in Cortina d'Ampezzo with 5-star lodging. No, we're in a nice country home in a walking village that's a quick bus ride away from, a town of 10,000 people and 45 minutes away from a city of 100,000. And we couldn't be more excited. The hiking trails right out the back door beckon.
That is incredible. And I think many people listening may look at that somewhat picturesque version of financial independence and work optional lifestyle And I know it when you talk about what it is, it sounds literally unaffordable or unachievable to many. But
Right.
with the diligence, the work in controlling your lifestyle, and really not controlling it, you haven't been Spartan. You're not throwing, you're not wearing burlap, running around throwing ash on yourself. Lamenting how difficult it is to live the life you live. Instead, it's you're living the life you live, and you're making each choice in a way to maximize your enjoyment of your lifestyle without. I would say it's easy to take the shortcut. Like I will say, like my lawnmower buying experience, for one silly example, would be like I could have sat on the couch and ordered that right off their website, and it would have been delivered,
Yeah.
and I wouldn't have had to go meet anybody or borrow a trailer and all of that to go get it. And yet, I think for everyone out there, and maybe this would be a good place for us to wrap. What have you found that you kind of, after getting good at it, maybe not initially, but do you find that it's super enjoyable and you can get the same dopamine hit you might get from buying something by instead being very crafty about either how you afford it, something like the airline miles hack, or by just delaying it and getting that dopamine hit when you look at it again and go, I would not have been as happy with that as I thought I would have been here 3 weeks later?
Absolutely. And I would add to that it's about making lifestyle adjustments. So finding rewarding activities that you don't have to pay for. We were talking about hosting at home versus going out to dinner. And what about volunteering in the community? Because that's something that's really big for me. I ended up directing a Christmas show at one of the local historic museums for a few years in a row. It was a really rewarding experience for me, working with the writers of the show and the performers and trying to bring out the best in them. And yes, there are always going to be little dramas that pop up, but being able to manage those personalities, at the end, it turned out to be a really great production. And we decided we were going to continue to do other projects with this museum. So then we ended up building a nature trail. All of these things are hobbies that don't cost me anything except my tools and my transportation. So I find that those are equally rewarding as opposed to sitting in a theater. And yes, I will catch a Broadway show, or I will drop $100 to catch something coming through town, but not every weekend, maybe quarterly, maybe a couple times a year. It's really just a matter of creating habits that are rewarding for you.
That's great. That's great. Well, Chris, thank you from me, from Corey and Sound Financial Group. And I know our audience, I'll thank you for them in advance of them getting to hear this, for being open and vulnerable. And, here we are talking about that thing on this show every single week that Mama said was impolite to talk about in mixed company, whether that was religion, politics, or money. And we consistently do that. And you've just kind of laid bare a bunch of the stuff that you've been doing and how it works and how it's working out, that here at the age of 52, you're going to step off into financial independence that you've built for the sake of funding your work optional lifestyle. And not very many people get a chance to say that. And even fewer, Chris, would have the generosity of heart to just be here and share it with, thousands of strangers who are going to hear this episode.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah. Well, and to all of you out there, we hope that this has been transformative, informative, and at a minimum, given you a chance to look at what you're doing, or maybe some slight new perspective and what you might be able to do to make that 1 degree shift. And as always, here at Sound Financial Group, we hope that this episode has been an opportunity for you to better design and build a good life.